In a world constantly shifting between war and diplomacy, one move has captured global attention. The United States has officially deployed around 100 troops to oversee the implementation of the newly brokered ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, a deal shaped under the revived framework of the Trump Peace Initiative. For years, the Middle East has been a stage for both strategic cooperation and explosive confrontations. But this recent development marks a turning point. Not because of the number of troops, but because of what their presence represents: direct American involvement in enforcing regional stability without becoming an active combatant. According to official statements, these U.S. troops will not enter Gaza, nor will they participate in any military operations. Their mission is defined as monitoring, verification, and humanitarian coordination. That means they'll operate from surrounding bases, likely in Israel's southern territory, with satellite and drone support from naval assets in the eastern Mediterranean. This deployment comes after months of escalating tensions and back-channel negotiations. Since the last major conflict in Gaza, both Israel and Hamas have faced internal and external pressure to end the cycle of violence. The new ceasefire, designed under international supervision, includes the gradual exchange of detainees, the rebuilding of civilian infrastructure, and the introduction of an independent Palestinian Administrative Council for Gaza. However, not everyone is convinced this will hold. Analysts argue that this first phase is fragile and could easily collapse if either side perceives violations or political manipulation. The strategic layer: from a military perspective, the U.S. presence carries multiple signals. First, it sends a message to Iran and regional militias that Washington is once again positioning itself as a stabilizer in the region. Second, it reaffirms the U.S.-Israel alliance, even as Washington calls for restraint. And third, it demonstrates that the U.S. is willing to use limited forward presence, small, specialized units, to project power without committing to large-scale intervention. This model isn't new. The Pentagon has used similar approaches in Iraq, Syria, and parts of Africa. But the political context here is different. The involvement in Gaza's ceasefire aligns directly with former President Trump's peace vision, which emphasized regional normalization over long-term occupation or military control. Experts point out that this move could open doors for new diplomatic channels, perhaps even between Israel and Gulf nations who've been watching the conflict closely. If the ceasefire endures, it could create a framework for a broader Middle East security dialogue, something the region hasn't seen in decades. Regional reactions. Turkey's President Erdogan reiterated that any political solution must protect Syria's territorial integrity, warning against the empowerment of separatist forces. Meanwhile, in Europe, leaders are cautiously optimistic, welcoming U.S. engagement but urging transparency and humanitarian coordination. Russia, on the other hand, has criticized the move, calling it an extension of American influence under the pretext of peacekeeping. The humanitarian aspect beyond geopolitics, the ceasefire offers a rare chance for relief. Aid agencies have confirmed that limited humanitarian convoys have begun moving through monitored corridors. For the first time in months, electricity and water services are being restored in parts of Gaza. The presence of international observers, including American officers, aims to guarantee that supplies reach civilians rather than being diverted. However, skepticism remains. Peace in the Middle East has always been fragile, built on promises that often crumble under political pressure. The key question now is, will both sides honor their commitments once the international spotlight dims? A global ripple effect: the U.S. deployment also intersects with broader global tensions, particularly with Russia and China. Analysts note that the U.S. is shifting toward multi-theater deterrence, balancing priorities in Europe, the Indo-Pacific, and the Middle East simultaneously. Sending troops, even in limited numbers, sends a message that Washington remains capable of managing multiple crises at once. At the same time, this move puts the Biden administration under domestic scrutiny. Critics argue that sending troops, even in a monitoring role, risks deeper entanglement. Supporters, however, see it as a strategic investment in long-term stability. As the ceasefire unfolds, all eyes remain on whether this experiment in limited intervention can truly prevent a return to war. If successful, it could redefine how peacekeeping missions operate in modern conflict zones: smaller, smarter, and more politically driven. Final analysis: the Middle East is entering a new chapter, one that balances force with diplomacy. The U.S. deployment may seem minor on paper, but symbolically, it's massive. It represents Washington's reassertion of influence in a region long defined by unpredictability. Over the coming weeks, military analysts expect to see increased surveillance activity over the Gaza border, maritime patrols in the eastern Mediterranean, and high-level diplomatic exchanges aimed at securing the ceasefire's next stages. This story is still developing, and in the complex puzzle of Middle Eastern geopolitics, every move counts. Because in this region, peace is never permanent. It's negotiated, monitored, and constantly at risk of breaking. And for the first time in years, the United States is back at the center of that balance.